Hello, once again. How are you all? Welcome. Welcome to this session of this special course on first aid for all of those in this migrant, refugee, and displaced situation. And as I remind you a few days ago, in addition to being able to extend on the subject of discrimination, we are in different regions. That's why this second part is devoted to the different initiatives to stop discrimination in Central America. It's different from what we've seen before. And before reading the bio, I want to tell you that we talked about this. And as of this class, we will begin to open microphones gradually and as much as possible be very brief, very concrete, with 30 seconds long. And we will see how things will be solved and if it's working or if we return back to the format of writing. And the material we sent you beforehand, it will be very different, and we hope to have greater awareness. So, Luis Argueta is a director and producer of Guatemalan American Theater, The Silence the, El Silencio de Neto, the history of a child who goes into being a teenager after the coup d'etat in 54 in Guatemala. And the Guardian named Mr. Argueta as one of the national icons living in Guatemala, together with Rigoberto Menchú, um, Nobel Prize, and the singer composer Ricardo Arjona. And also, we have the story of a larger place in the United States. The second, Abrazos, continues the travel of 14 American children who traveled from Minnesota to Guatemala to meet their grandparents, and in some cases, their brothers or sisters for the first time. And then the U-Turn is the third movie in this series, which is about working migrant women and a group of children who transform their lives thanks to the courage, solidarity, and visa, a return visa. And in August, he was also awarded the Orden del Quetzal, and the highest honor granted by Guatemala. He is a private consultant and also a conference speaker in migratory issues. And he can be contacted at his email, and his films can be found online. It is a great honor to hear him. And thank you for the movies that you shared with us. And this is going to be an entirely different format due to this subject on immigration. Thank you very much. You now have the floor, Mr. Argueta. And to you, Azia, and all participants, thank you. Good afternoon. I send you a big hug from Guatemala. It's a great honor for me and a great pleasure also to be able to share with you this afternoon, this sunny afternoon, from the middle of the American continent. I don't know why, but I got kind of blue and with nostalgia because I was reading the story or the history of the struggle for civil rights in the US. And honestly speaking, it's a humongous struggle over 150 years. What's this got to do with the first aid for migrants? Well, I think it has a lot to do with it, but we'll come to that when I try to answer some of the questions that were asked at the end of the class with Mr. Androsi. And now, something you said in the beginning made me smile. You said keynote speeches 30 seconds long are something we love. I want to tell you something. Maybe 20 years ago, creating 30-second messages, they were not keynote speeches, but they were messages on TV, first in English. I was living in New York at the time, where I had lived until 4 years ago. And then I discovered that gold mine, which Madison Street and Wall Street discovered in New York. And that's the market of Hispanos. So I started making ads. Those were the 30-second keynote speeches. This was a life which was prosperous in economic terms. But a very special time came, which was 9/11, 1991. I was in New York and life changed for millions of people. One of the consequences for that day was the creation of Homeland Security Department, which now groups several entities that have to supervise migration. And in 2003, 2 years after that attack on Twin Towers, that INS was no longer in service and new agencies were created, and they now govern the entry of migrants, of refugees to the US. And also, they have affected human mobility throughout the world. Well, I want to say that I was doing advertising and publicity in 2001 when that terrible day 9/11 took place. At that time, I think I have sold my soul to the devil. And that shows you my Catholic upbringing when I talk about that expression. So I started looking for something which doesn't fill my pocket like advertising says, but maybe warms my soul. And maybe that little piece of soul that was left, hopefully there is some left so I can recover the rest. And then I started seeking something. I don't know how, but I grabbed the video cam, where I came from a tradition of working with large groups and large budgets and with 35 millimeter movie cameras. And I started working with this little one, and I found uh, Guatemalan migrants in New York and the surrounding areas, and as far as way as Florida, as Boston. And I started interviewing them with people who had just arrived, that had been there a long time, with people who worked with migrants. And also, in some cases, I had the opportunity to interview those who arrived later on. This experience, these interviews, and I edited them in small segments, and I created voices of silence. And now, years later, I see that these voices were already present, and it motivated the production of this movie, which led to my childhood, where I remembered that I had learned in my upbringing to remain quiet. And through movies, I found out you should not remain quiet. But that's a story for another day. These interviews were placed on internet, these voices of silence, and I started to feel a little better. And then 2008 came along. In the summer of that year, I realized that there was a roundup of immigration by ICE, the famous Immigration Customs Enforcement in the US. And this happened in Postville, Iowa, a small town there. And I was in the Midwest of the country at the time in Michigan. I had studied engineering. That's another story. I'm an engineer by profession, but I had never gone to Iowa. And when I found out about this roundup and of the 389 migrants workers who were arrested that morning at a terrible cost, over $2 million. The majority of them were from Guatemala. And this information motivates me to go to Iowa and see what's happening, because I was reading on how this happened, how these people were rounded up, and how there was treatment. Those of you know, if you've seen The Godfather, they were given an offering they could not refuse. Mhm. It was well planned in the bad sense of the word. And some went to jail for 5 months and then were deported. And we will see one of these people, Mercedes. And I went to Iowa thinking I'm going to interview 3 or 4 or 5 people. I'll upload them on my page and that's it. But the stories I found there, the opening up of their hearts, these people, when they told me this story, changed my life radically. And that 4-day trip, which was going to be 4 days, became 2 weeks long. And that became 29 more travels throughout 3 years in a small town I didn't know existed before. And also, this made me come back to Guatemala and follow the path of many. This is 17 times in that same time, those 3 years. And what resulted from this was my first documentary called Abused. Now, a pause here. I go back to the first time that I found face to face these Guatemalan refugees. And this was on the southern coast of my home country in the cotton fields. Can you imagine this? And I was there in 1967. Many of you weren't even born then. But back in that time, I go from New York to Guatemala because I had learned of another story on the front page of the New York Times when I found out about what had happened in Iowa. And it was incredible what I read. I went to Guatemala, I filmed some interviews, and I produced a documentary called The Cost of Cotton. I want us to watch a segment of this documentary. Can you now turn on the camera? Roll the camera.
spraying a chemical on the crop. The insects, in fact, die, and the damage is reduced on the crop.
How much do you make a day? Not much. 50 to 75 cents. The Guatemalan poet Otto Rene Castillo said that the workers of cotton have so many suns accumulated in their faces that with them 1,000 planets could be lit.
Ok, gracias, Azaret.
Okay, thank you. The man who says to me that he doesn't earn very much, 2 or 3 chocas, that's about 50 or to 75 cents on the dollar back then. I continued talking to him and I said, how is it that you go through everything you do every day, do everything you do under such severe conditions, and for such little money? And not just he alone, there were a group of children, his kids, his nieces, nephews, grandkids, I don't know. It's better than nothing. It's a big difference. There's a big difference between nothing and very little. I'll never forget that. And many years later, when I go to Postville, Iowa, and I interview a woman who tells me of the horrendous conditions under which they work, that is processing meat plant, and the hours she works and how much paid, more than 2 or 3 chocas, of course. But for me, it's difficult to justify. And I tell her, and why do you do this? And as if someone had whispered in my ear from the cotton fields in Guatemala, there's a big difference between nothing and very little. This lack of alternatives had led this woman, also from Guatemala, and also from the same highlands in Guatemala, where the man with the hat had gone to pick cotton in 1978, 88, 98, 30 years before. And now this woman from that part of the highlands, no longer on the coast to pick cotton, but she was going to Iowa to cut up pieces of meat. So I realized that there's a great transformation of the economy, but also the persistence of inequality in immigration. So I continued interviewing and trying to understand this phenomenon of immigration that I had experienced personally, but in a very privileged position. I had been a quote unquote good student, but I had the privilege of getting a scholarship and therefore be able to study in the US, engineering and others. So I had studied literature. Even though I wasn't an immigrant, I didn't understand the laws of immigration. And this movie called Abused with the UCLA. This was my school on immigration, this movie. Maybe you've already seen the trailer for the movie, but let's look at it together. Let's watch it. Not as long as others, but it summarizes the movie very well. So, us, can we watch this? It's Abusers.
Member-supported KPVL 89.1 Postville, community radio for the four-county area.
As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and
During our May 12th operation at Agri-Processors in Postville, Iowa, ICE agents executed criminal and civil search warrants at the company, resulting in the arrest of 389 undocumented alien workers.
Ya estaba lleno de migración adentro.
It was full of immigration agents. And I told my friends, come on, let's go. They told me, come on, let's go. I said, no. I didn't do anything wrong. I only worked. The women were terrified. And they'd say, what about my children? What about my kids? All they could talk about was their kids because many mothers had their children.
Our agents and officers performed the mission lawfully, professionally, and compassionately.
They came for a kid that worked with me and they sat him. They grabbed him by the hair and they sat him down. And I saw when they hit him, they hit the ones that were fleeing. And when a girl released herself, a woman in dark skin who said what she was an immigration agent, get up, bitch. You can't get away. And there's no reason why you should get away. I saw the police that were down there and they started mistreating people and they would laugh at us. Hey, you sons of bitches, you're gonna really, you're really gonna suffer. And if I don't care, if you try to flee, we'll kick you. And I don't care if you go to the hospital, you die. They took our boots off and they chained us. And they chained us through our hands and through our legs. And
we got into the ambulance and we drove up to Agra.
Entramos a la ambulancia y
lines and rows of Hispanic workers on their knees like dogs, and they were just chained. And the environment was joking. It was kind of laughing. One of the ICE agents was making a joke out of how this individual had gotten hurt. They cuffed him, they put him on the cot, they put him in. 2 ICE agents jumped in the back with me. When I put the oxygen on, when I did the things that I was supposed to do, there were statements made like, why bother with that? And one of the ICE agents kept saying, hey, if he needs an IV, I can stick him with a needle. And he kept saying it over and over like I was going to let him do it.
Extraordinary care was taken to determine if any of the arrestees were sole caregivers or raised other humanitarian concerns.
I saw my friends from the oldest to the youngest. They were crying because they were taking away their parents. So what were you doing? All I could think was my mom. My mom was like shocked. And she said, I have nobody. I don't have any children. I'm alone here.
About humanitarian issues such as child custody or serious medical concerns.
So when they grabbed a Guatemalan and she said that she had children, and the guy from immigration said, okay, we're going to bring them over so that they can live with you. And she was afraid that they were going to grab us. And that's why she said she didn't have anybody.
ICE arranged to have the IHS professionals at the arrest site to immediately determine the needs of and status of any children affected by the operation.
Since I was a minor, they took me to where all the women with children were. They said, and then they changed me, and then they put me on a bus, and they took me where all the other kids were. Well, they, we were sad because we couldn't earn our weekly wages, and they took us our place of work. And they said, "Do you have money for food?" And I said, "No." I said, "No, I I really can't think about thinking, but my girls do need something to eat." So they took some food out of the pocket. So what I did, I started crying. I feel so unhappy like this, as if, I thought they were feeling pity for me. And they said, "No, we're helping because we can." Okay, this is the way I put it on, and then a green light comes on, and that means that it's already loaded or charged. I haven't, since I was apprehended on May 12th, I haven't been able to work. So people are helping us. All the people are helping us. They are pulling money together and helping us. They give us blankets, food, all kinds of things.
All they wanted, the same thing in life you and I wanted, was a better life. And the little kids here are U.S. citizens. What's going to happen? Just all this torment. Devastation and fear. That's what you could call Postville. Devastation and fear.
Postville was an experiment designed to instill fear among the country's immigrant population. It was supposed to be a pilot operation to serve as the model for future raids.
Adios, mis amigos, Jesus Maria. You won't have a name when you ride the big airplane. All it'll call you will be deported.
What the feds did not take into account was how the town's people, the workers, and the world would react.
ICE should direct its enforcement resources toward investigations of high-level threats to national security and employers that deliberately violate the law, not workers who are merely trying to feed their families and who contribute to the U.S. economy and to our social fabric.
Our government has left a humanitarian crisis for Sister Mary Macaulay and her good neighbors to cure. I call on all to contribute to St. Bridget's Church and on the federal government to respond with aid that guarantees survival for their schools, businesses, and institutions. It is time for America to adopt Postville.
I want to assure you, we will continue to stand with you, work with you, and pray with you. We will continue to challenge the employers who exploit you. We will continue to challenge our legislators. We will continue to challenge one another until that day comes when we will be able to rise to new life. It is at that point that together we will stand and proclaim, "Blessed are you, blessed is our God."
This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
Postville experience didn't end there. It didn't end with the production of the documentary. Later on, we'll see what the continuation of this story was. But I'd like to mention a couple of things that I learned from this experience. One was that there was a segment of the population in the United States with the great compassion and solidarity towards the migrants. Many recognized their own migrant origins, their own ethnic groups or nationalities inherited from their families, and there was a strong segment, an important segment of the population that recognized in these migrants not the alien, the alien or the foreigner, but based upon moral, religious, ethical convictions, they did what many religions mandate, and that is to welcome the person who comes from abroad. And by this mere act of opening their arms to them and welcoming them, they dignified the person coming from abroad. At the same time that it was a very specific act of solidarity and social justice. There's a phrase uttered by the woman in the restaurant and says, these people were here working, trying to give their children a better life. So what's going to happen? These children are US citizens. These children are US citizens. We need to keep this in mind when we see abrazos or hugs, because we will see what happened when these families became transnational families. And we see the creation of nuclei of what are known as mixed families, where at least one member, one of the parents, is an illegal migrant and the rest or part of the family are full-fledged US citizens. Finally, another one of the great lessons for me was the strength of need and also the blind faith of these migrants. It's interesting that this faith meets with the faith of many who provided support and that welcomed them at this very critical moment in their lives. That kind of reaction, I hope we have time, that brought them to join hands with what was happening. Now, that can be seen in many streets of the United States in the form of the protests against the injustices committed by the racial inequalities and the protests stemming from African descending men and women. This has been part of the experience of not many people in the United States, of other people in the world as well, but especially in the United States. Now, I met somebody during my travels, and her name is Mercedes Gomez. Mercedes Gomez was one of the people who were apprehended, and even though she had an ace under her sleeve, which was the fact that she had a minor child at school, a boy, but she was afraid. So she denied the fact that she was a mother. She said, I am alone. So that marked her and caused her to be imprisoned for 5 months, and after that she was deported. Can we watch Mercedes' story, please?
Sí, me preguntaron si tenía hijos. Yo les dije que
Yeah,
no.
I said that, no, I didn't have, my son was there. I said, no, I was afraid that they would bring him, they would apprehend him as well. This is La Aurora International Airport in Guatemala. Okay. They would tell me everything's going to be all right. But I felt very sad because I didn't want to leave him behind. But time went by and everything. And they would tell me, no, don't feel sad. Everything's going to be all right. Danny Mercedes' son was detained and deported 4 years later. Contrary to other deported migrants, after the Postville raid, Mercedes never tried to return to the United States again. And currently, she still lives in the place where she was, her place of origin. It's admirable that among the things that this woman has done, she is the only one who would not let herself be extorted or convinced under duress. When her son was still in the United States, there were people who threatened her, saying that they would turning him to the immigration police in the United States and other kinds of threats. But she never gave in. She never gave him a penny. She has been fortunate in that all her brothers are in the United States and have provided their support. So I met with this solidarity on the part of the community in the United States in towns like Postville. And the result, we will view it in a few moments in the segment called the U-turn. Not only individuals reacted against the injustices in the manner the 2008 raid in Postville was carried out, but also some state authorities reacted, specifically District Attorney from Iowa, who had been, before the raid, he had been conducting an investigation on the breach of the labor rights of minors, the violations of the rights of minors. This general attorney had found that in this meat processing plant, there were not only illegal immigrants unauthorized to be in the United States, therefore without a work permit, but there were also minors, children. And this investigation had to be stopped due to the raid. So once the dust settled after a couple of months, the general attorney concluded his investigation and raised charges against the plant, the owner, and the management of that meat processing plant. But there was a certain limitation in the statute. These felonies expired within 12 months. Therefore, they speeded the process to make these charges formal, and they gathered witnesses, but there were others that had been deported, including several children. Now, these minors should not have been deported because since they were minors, they should have been managed under a different department and not by ICE. However, when this was discovered, when it was discovered that several of them were minors, they were practically deported overnight. I was contacted by the state prosecutor's office because they couldn't find 4 kids that had been deported, and they wanted to have them as witnesses in a trial against the general manager of the plant for violations of the minors' workers' rights. Oh, there's a minor coming up right behind me here. Say hi. There are 338 people seeing us. Hi. Okay. Just a second. Give me a moment. So then they told me, can you help us find these kids? We can't locate them anywhere. And I've been in several of towns they came from, and I knew a few people. In fact, I knew one of them. And through these connections, I was able to find them. I was able to connect them with the state prosecutor's office in Iowa, and they offered these kids that if they agreed, with the permission of their parents, because some of them were still minor, if they agreed to return to Iowa to testify, the prosecutor's office would pay for their their trip, and would provide, of course, room and board during their stay, and they would testify in court about their own experiences. I not only found the 4 they were looking for, and another 3 more, and ultimately 7 of them returned to Iowa. Since one of them was still a minor or underage, they asked me to accompany them because migration did not allow this underage child to travel. So in this way, I was able to document this transition, and with the support of the community, we raised funds to engage a lawyer so that she would work on their cases, no longer for the violation of their labor rights of minors, but against certain violent crimes and abuses these kids, the same as other women, had been subjected to during their time as workers at the plant. These specific crimes of abuse were the foundation to request a special visa known as a U visa. It is part of a law that protects the rights of women in cases of abuse. Now, can we view the U-turn? Because that's what we were just discussing.
And I saw the buses and the men that were getting carried out with chains.
Around 10 o'clock this morning, immigration agents surrounded the agri-processors plant in Postville. At least 300 workers remain in federal custody tonight.
Y entonces se acercó mi marido y me dijo, no, me dijo, ya nos tienen, me dijo, nomás diga la verdad. Y eso me dijo, ya no lo vi más.
A mí me pusieron un brazalete, a mis hijos no, entonces no podía hacer nada. Nosotros abríamos la refri y no teníamos nada.
Sinceramente ya había perdido la ilusión y ya mis sueños de que un día regresara yo a Estados Unidos ya se iba a terminar.
So many people across the nation have joined us to help the people in Postville.
Just this feeling that welled up that said, Perio, you have to go to Postville.
Como otra familia para nosotros.
Nos ayudaron a pagar renta, nos ayudaron a pagar biles.
I ended up representing way over 100 clients pro bono.
Tengo 16 años y trabajaba casi las 12 horas.
What has happened to you is a crime in this country. If you help the investigators, they can protect you.
A victim is someone that we fight for regardless of why they're here.
This case is about the children. Bottom line, that's what this case was about.
Porque es romper con el silencio que es el que le da el poder a los abusivos. Y ustedes al hablar le quitan ese poder.
This is going to be quite a ride, and it was.
We got 3 visas approved.
States like Iowa won't tolerate abusive workers, regardless of their legal status.
Después de estar sufriendo y sufriendo, no saber qué va a pasar, todo empezó como a alumbrarse y a ver el futuro más bueno.
My apologies because I couldn't find the version with subtitles in Spanish for this trailer. But what I saw is part about what Andrew mentioned in his presentations. He said the United States is an imperfect but perfectible country. I would expand that by saying we human beings are a quite imperfect species and somewhat perfectible. Talking about the perfectibility or the pursuit of improving that country that had so ill-treated migrants during the raid, we saw that there are laws and there are courts and there are people for whom social justice and justice are important. It's interesting to note that during that trial, the prosecutor was unable to prove that the owner of the plant was guilty. The prosecutor lost the case. They lost the case because of the bylaws and the laws were very strict. We had to prove 2 things at that time. One is intentionality on the part of the general manager, who was the only one who went to trial, and we had to prove knowledge. We had to prove the fact that he knew that they were minors in the time that they were working there. And the defense was very skillful in that regard and sowed the seed of doubt among the jury. And therefore, but he was not found guilty. But an important thing to note is that the labor rights statutes in minors changed after this trial. Today, you do not need to prove that the person in charge of a business such as that one knows or is aware of the fact that the workers are minors and are doing a job they shouldn't. As long as the case exists, it will suffice for them to be held responsible. In other words, they don't actually need to know. The fact that the minors are there is enough. Sanctions or fines, they used to be $100 per breach or violation. In other words, if a kid was working for 1 day at that plant, that would count as 1 breach, fined with $100. Today, it's $10,000 per breach. Or that is the positive side. The sad side is that the number of labor inspectors in Iowa has not increased. Therefore, it's as difficult today as it was before to find these cases. But the important thing is that this lawyer, at the end of everything, was able to get not only the 3 visas she showed us, she was able to secure 176 visas, U visas, for people who had been victims of crimes of abuse at the plant. About 3 months ago, that U visa entitles you to work and provides the individual a path towards permanent residence that can be requested 3 years after having obtained the visa, and 4 years after obtaining the visa, they can request citizenship. About 3 months ago, the first person of these 170 something that obtained the U visa was sworn in as a citizen of the United States. In other words, that person will vote in the next elections.
The same as the children of many migrants, which we will see a little later on. Now, all this contact, face-to-face contact with the migrants after many years, it's been 12 years since this famous Postville raid, has convinced me that in order to be able to begin any first aid work, assistance in mental health for migrants, you need that one-to-one contact. You need that personal transformation. At least that's my case. Okay, how we doing for time here? I was going to show you Mercedes. It's about 2 minutes long. Mercedes Gomez, 10 years later. I would like to make a suggestion. You have 30 minutes, and we took 10 minutes more with the previous speaker. If we could stay a little bit later for one single time, I know many people will say yes, that we can make up that time that was lost with the previous speaker. So, okay. Okay, I agree. So then let's watch Mercedes 10 years later.
Fue que nos venimos con deudas y ya lo mismo otra vez. Entonces, créame que para mí es un poco triste recordar todo esto. Sí. Mi hermano que se llama Alfredo fue el único que se salvó, por decirlo así. Sí. Dice que a él le avisaron, dice que le dijeron, salgan porque viene la migra. Y él dice que dijo, mi hermana, yo regreso por mi hermana. No, ya no hay tiempo para que regreses por tu hermana. Y salió. Pues la grande dice que cuando ella supo y todo lo que fueron los 5 meses, ella decía, ¿qué estará pasando a mi mamá? Ella sufrió mucho, ella lloraba porque ella quería hablar conmigo y no podíamos hablar. Y igual yo sufría mucho allá, pues decía yo, ¿qué van a comer mis hijos si yo mantengo a mis papás y a mis hijos? Y mire que yo, fue duro, fue tan difícil. Sí. Entonces a todo esto pues sí me ha dado una como decepción y digo yo, no siquiera pudiera viajar porque la vida aquí está tan difícil. Y cada poco asaltan los buses. Entonces póngale que uno aquí se arriesga mucho. Sí, hasta de perder la vida. Sí.
¿Y qué quiere que sepan allá ahora?
Lo que quiero que sepan es que le den en primera parte, que le den gracias a Dios por la oportunidad que Dios les dio de estar allá. En segundo lugar, pues que aprovechen la vida, porque ellos tienen una vida excelente, que nosotros quisiéramos tener, pero lamentablemente nosotros no tuvimos esa oportunidad. Y les mando un saludo a todos. a los que me puedan ver.
¿Y qué quiere que le manden?
Y nomás les digo que me manden una visa para que pueda viajar y estar junto con ellos allá.
It appears to me that it's wonderful that this woman, after 10 years, has survived. And she can still smile and send good wishes to those who did get their visas and her parents. The U visa or U return or return visa is not just for the direct, but also for immediate family members. If someone is a victim of an abuse, violent crime, and is able to prove such, they have to agree with the authorities first to investigate the crime and then certify that there was physical or psychological harm that was committed. It was fascinating here in this case because that one had lost a finger, another an arm, but others didn't have physical scars. But through forensic psychologists, they were able to verify the trauma. And this was the proof that there was a crime of violence. It's not just for the victim, him or herself, but also can be for the spouse, for the children under 21 years of age and unmarried, and for the parents as well. In the case of Jimmy Gomez, who says, my dreams to return to the US had vanished, he was able to extend the benefits of his return visa to his mother, his father, his little sister, a brother, his wife, and 2 children. Jimmy became 8 people. But it's admirable. Mercedes can smile after all this and continue struggling for a more or less dignified life under such adverse conditions. This video with her message was shown in the commemoration of the 10th anniversary in Brownsville about 12 years ago. Seems like centuries because people got together to reiterate their commitment to seek lasting solutions to this non-ending issue of migration. And now we'll look at something else. That is migrants who have been deported or returned. It is a big debate amongst international agencies, as many times they want to use euphemisms for reality. Instead of deported, they say repatriated or returned. But I think we have to call things by their proper name. Let's look at examples of Guatemalans who have been deported in the last few years.
Sí, tengo un año y medio de haber llegado aquí otra vez. Pues ahorita vivo con mi mamá actualmente, porque pues todavía no he podido tener una casa propia. Que el simple hecho de que allá ya no estás trabajando solo para sobrevivir, sino que puedes prosperar y aquí pues ganas apenas para poder sobrevivir. Con mucho gusto regresaría. Y que me gustaría que mi país cambiara, pero pues parece que nunca va a cambiar.
todos vienen y vienen con las tristezas de sus familias y en lo personal a mí es lo más, ¿cómo se llama? Es lo más doloroso. Dejar dejar tu familia, tus niños, oír una llamada que te dicen, ¿sabes qué? Tuve que llevar a los niños al psicólogo porque andan mal. Que muchas veces mis noches son negras, ¿me entiendes? Y oscuras y solas. Y con la única persona que yo tengo para desahogarme es, ¿cómo se llama? A mí mismo y a Dios, que es el que me oye todos los días. Y gracias por dejarme desahogar, que muchas veces a mí me hace falta.
I got back to Guatemala on the 22nd of July, and since that date, I'm trying to get a job, and again, it's actually really hard to get a job here in Guatemala. I don't like to be here. It's hard to be here, pero at the same time, I'm glad I'm here. I'm hoping to get a good job, and I'm hoping that we can do something. And for all these people that are being deported, it's hard, it's not easy. Y yo en Estados Unidos estudié el grado 12 y como me deportaron no pude traerme un certificado, no pude traerme un papel, no pude traerme nada. Aquí en Guatemala todavía no hay lo que se llama equivalencias para poder decirme en qué lugar he quedado, en qué escuela estoy o qué grado puedo seguir o qué carrera puedo continuar. Estar en Guatemala es bendición, amo Guatemala, es mi país, me siento bien, pero como vuelvo a repetir, agarrar un trabajo no es fácil. He intentado aplicar en diferentes lugares, he intentado muchas cosas. Yo creo que sí hay posibilidades. And I'm calling out those people that have the power to do something. Please do something for us. No nos dejen afuera. Do not leave us out. We deserve a chance. Please give us a chance.
Solo me mandaron un diseño y yo lo copié y lo diseñé y me lo fabriqué. Porque ellos me han ayudado con un capital semilla que me ha ayudado bastante a seguir adelante aquí en Guatemala y gracias a ellos ahorita estoy más que orgulloso de mi trabajo. I do these shoes. This is my job.
Here we can see those deported who are struggling with some assistance, with some inclusion programs and reinsertion programs where they are reinserted into their society, their country. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, these groups that were receiving people in the airport when they arrived are no longer there because health protocols are such that you cannot have this direct contact. The airports have been closed, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, but the flights with deportees have continued. They dropped off in May, June, July, they increased again, and May and June in Guatemala, no more than 50 per flight were allowed because it's usually 100 to 115. But lastly, in August, unfortunately, it has been on the average of 99 people per flight, and also many unaccompanied minors. The seed capital initiatives, or those for training those who know English but have no skills on a computer, are the initiatives that have helped some of them. The migrant flow that have been deported have been so large that they have only been able to capture a small percentage of the returnees. It's very difficult because some shelters, like the House of the Migrant in Guatemala and El Salvador, where these returnees could spend a few nights before relocation or returning to their rural communities, are now closed. So the challenges entail or are very large, are very profound. I think Tony, the one who says, "Thank you for letting me unburden myself," gives us an idea that I think is very important regarding this support for first aid for migrants. That is a small gesture of listening to their stories. I think they are exercising not only solidarity, but this fact of being able to pay attention in their hearts, in their minds. We are performing some small act of social justice. And in order to conclude, I hope I haven't bored you too much, but I would like to see something that we've considered an alternative to isolationist policies, nationalistic policies, and the creation of walls. And it's a documentary that is called Embraces. And it's part of the overall movie.
Nosotros, Señor, tú es que nos das de noche, tú es que nos das de día, tú es que nos das de todo, Padre Santo. Dios, Padre Celestial, te pido, Señor, en esta hora, en esta mañana, que tú es que escuche nuestras oraciones aquí, Padre, por todo.
Gracias en esta mañana por esta preciosa hora.
Gracias, abuelas y abuelos, por su conocimiento, por su sabiduría.
Mila wachte tot tap, te bis que familia, que familia de Estados Unidos, escribe ahí.
Que escuche nuestras oraciones aquí, Padre, por todos que estamos aquí pidiendo por nuestros nietos.
Hace como 16 años que no viste mi hijo Luis, casi ya 16 años, ya hace mucho tiempo. Cuando se fueron mis hijos, me sentí preocupado, penosa. Esta es la tristeza para mí. Al ver mis 4 varones ahora que están allá en los estados, con sus esposos, con sus hijitos, pero afuera del país.
Es muy difícil estar lejos de la familia por mucho tiempo, quizá 15, 16 años, estar lejos de sus papás de uno no es fácil. Siempre en tu corazón está en que no lo puedes hablar a ver tus papás, no lo puedes visitar, decir cómo estás o cómo amaneciste, todo eso siempre es, aunque se puede hacer por teléfono, pero no es igual.
Yo soy Brandon Eliazar. Hace 14 años que no veo a mis papás.
No sé por qué no la trajo mi hijo cuando era chiquita. Me duele mucho, me ha enfermado mucho por él, porque me hace falta. Antes cada vez que yo le hablaba nomás se ponía a llorar, a llorar. Dice, yo no tengo mamá, me decía. ¿Cómo no, mi hijo? Yo soy tu mamá. Yo le platicaba, ¿por qué la dejé a mi hijo? Porque éramos pobres, no teníamos nada. ¿Por qué no me llevaron? Dice. Le digo, porque para pasarte en desierto es duro.
Caminando se fueron, pues, y fueron... No me recuerdo si ellos llegaron a los 15 días o...
Dios, más
¿no?
llegaron como unos
40 días. Puedo morir, dije yo. Me dio miedo. Como casi era chiquito, pues, estaba mamando.
No tenemos papeles para ir y regresar. Y es por eso hemos, tal vez no abandonado la familia, pero siempre hablamos por teléfono, mandarle un dinerito, pero darle un abrazo es lo que extrañamos, es lo que anhelamos. Pero hasta hoy en día no sé cuándo habrá esa oportunidad para abrazar a la familia. Saliendo de la puerta de mi casa no sé qué vaya a pasar allá afuera. ¿Regreso con mis hijos o no regreso? ¿Regreso con mi esposa o no regreso? O sea, ese es el miedo que se vive aquí. No sabes si regresas.
Aquí estoy, aunque pase necesidades, aunque me tenga que esconder mientras que estoy con ellos, todo por ellos lo hago, porque ellos merecen estar aquí. Tal vez yo no, pero ellos sí.
I felt a strong sense of guilt, and I was really struck by the injustice of that. And I remember the thought coming to me at that moment. The thought was, you know what, the parents can't go, but most of their children are US born citizens, and they have the same rights and freedoms that I do.
Before I went to Guatemala, I didn't believe I had a brother. Now I believe them that I had a brother with nice and kindness.
Ellos los dos con el Brando se dieron cuenta que son hermanos. Ahora sí, ya vi a mi hermano con mis propios ojos y ya toqué y ya le platiqué. Y ahora viene la pregunta, ¿por qué estamos separados?
My mom and my dad, they wanted us to go to Guatemala to see how they lived their lives, how they woke up every day, how they ate, how they did stuff around the house. It was hard.
I just wish there was a door that you could just go through and back all the time.
I was talking alone because my voice was cut off. Anyway, I just want to say that in that last phrase, dedicated to the 4.5 million of US children who have at least one parent without documentation. This 4.5 million, probably more today, are the voters of the future. They are the citizens who are a bridge. They will destroy any wall built up, either physical or emotional, and whom I believe we should support and help them to become true bicultural, binational ambassadors, not only because they are children, they are the future, but because they have this double nationality. And we hope to believe in them and see in them an awareness of their identity and the importance of the culture of their families, and above all, their grandparents. The Mayan culture reveres grandparents, as we know. Now, speaking to Mayan culture, I want to end with a phrase from Popol Vuh. We should not be many, we should not be varied, we should be one and let no one fall behind. Thank you so very much. I'm going to place on the chat where you can see my movies, recommend them to others, and there's a commercial. If someone in the future wants me to speak at your university, at your organizations, write me to my email, luisargueta@hotmail.com. My problem is that sometimes we have 100 of people who might be inviting you, or they have all been asking me how to get in touch with you. And thank you for posing all this suggestions, these different realities like a promise. There are some people who raise their hands. I have first Flor Montero. Would you like the mic, or do you want me to read your question? And we also have Charlie Suarez, who has his hand raised. So I'm going to open the mic. Okay, Charlie now lowered his hand. Now that I give you the floor, nobody wants to speak up. Juan Manuel, I give you, there are three now. Juan Manuel, Peña, Bruce, and Julio Cesar. And these are the mics I have on. Juan Manuel, you now have the floor. Please go ahead and speak.
Gracias. Buenas
Thank you
tardes,
very
Luis.
much. Thank you,
Pues primero, bueno,
Luis.
la verdad es que muy
First of
muy
all, I
emocionante ver todo
wish
el
to
trabajo que has
say
hecho
that
y
everything
pues con
you've
este
done
tiempo que
is very
tenemos
emotional.
corto, la
And
pregunta
with the
sería
short time I have, my
eh,
question
en el
is,
tema de la discriminación
in the subject
y
of
todo lo que se vive
discrimination and
o lo que viven las
everything
personas allá
that
en
is
Estados Unidos,
seen by
la
people
propia
in the
discriminación de la
US,
gente latina que ha
discrimination
logrado
by
obtener ya una
Latinos as
ciudadanía
well, who have
hacia también
obtained
los
their
propios migrantes.
citizenship,
En ese
and they
sentido, ¿cómo lo
discriminate
ves tú?
migrants. What is your opinion about this?
I think that it is part of our selfish human nature, and also part of certain processes that have divided us and led us to believe that we're different from others. And due to small advantages, whether administrative or of a national origin or financial situation, that lead us to believe that we're better than others. But I think that this leads me to the same notion that we are a perfectible species and that we need to struggle against this racism that I believe all of us have inside of us. And we need to be aware of the stories and history with the capital H of our countries. By the way, I'd like to mention a book called This Land is Our Land, which is the name of the song that we were listening to in Abused, and that also is heard at the end of Abrazos. It's a book by a professor of the University of New York, NYU, called This Land is Our Land. M-E-T-H, Metha. I forget the name. His name is with an S. He shares a story that I find fascinating. He says that his grandfather, they came from India. So his grandfather was at a park in London one day, and a Londoner approached him. I'm thinking that he had a cane and his umbrella and his hat, and he said, "Why don't you come back where you came from?" Something we've heard a lot in the United States. And Metha's grandfather said, "We are here because you were there. We are the collectors." It's a very simple and interesting phrase. These historic relations, these relationships between empires and colonies, these relationships between exploitation and extraction of resources are the things that we need to keep in mind and convey to new generations in order to realize that even though privileges can be false, can lead us to believe that we're better than others. Okay, thank you very much. Reese, first of all, we're all extremely moved. Thank you very much for your work. And the question is perhaps philosophical. What causes anybody, human being, act the way you do in the face of pain? Some enclose themselves in themselves and others open themselves to compassion. So what caused you to open up and embrace this pain? I don't know if I know what it was exactly, but realizing that question in the midst of the university. So why if God placed me here and you there, why isn't it the other way around? So realize that there's a very elementary connection among us, and that the stars aligned in a certain way for us to face each other in different places. But actually, there's no explanation and no differences. If you tell me your story, and for me, receiving it is a great privilege and responsibility. And in conveying it to others, I don't know if that answers your question. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Phil, for the question. Bruce, can you? Hi, good afternoon. I'm very happy, Luis, to hear from you. I want to thank you. I'm also Guatemalan, and I recognize the importance of images. We are a very silenced and quiet people that has not yet been able to speak to heal wounds. So my question is, no, it's not a question. I want to say that what you've done has contributed a great deal to allow us to approach each other and understand each other. That's what I wanted to tell you, and thank you very much for what you do. Bruce, thank you very much. You have spoken very clearly and decisively. We are a very silenced country. And as Uncle Ernesto says, that when you have to speak, you need to speak. And for me, it was difficult to break that silence, and I did so on the experience of Guatemala. And when I came to the United States, there was a moment when I said, I can no longer be a victim. And allowing these trends to silence our opinions and our voices and keeping us to react to the things we see. I would like to establish a brief link to the protests in the streets of the United States that are occurring nowadays. There are many people that they have a lot to do with the racial protest of 1968, for example, in which there were this kind of violent protest. But that reaction goes much beyond. The history of civil rights in the United States starts in the early part of the 20th century. And for the first time today, we are seeing that there is solidarity between African descendants, Caucasians, people of different skin colors, and that the migrants who play an important role, and migrants are playing an important role in these protests. I think it was Nicole who said that memory as a resistance. It's important for us to share and our histories with the future generations and not remain silent. Thank you very much. Julio Cesar, could you please open your microphone? Ready? Go ahead. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me now? Yes, go ahead. Great. I'm Julio Cesar Chavez. I'm from the city of Querétaro in Mexico, and my question has to do with the discrimination and segregation of migrant groups. Do you believe that groups who are devoted to migrants, those of us, for example, here in Mexico, could we join to develop or implement a public policy program that could be included in the public agenda, either the current public agenda or in the forthcoming administration's public agenda? I certainly hope so. And I would encourage everybody to try to form alliances and groups and promoting a basic understanding, a uniform understanding, so that we can begin to look upon migrants not as a foreigner who comes to threaten us, but as a brother who comes to collaborate with us. The task is huge, but whatever I can, but I truly encourage you all to try to do this not only as a group, but individually every day. It's not easy, but it can be done. Thank you very much. Luis, can we hear a couple of questions more? And sadly, we're going to have to close our session because right now we're quite late. Claudia, can you please open up your microphone, activate your microphone? And Sam, please prepare. Sam, please.
Listo.
You're on. Okay, great.
Hola, muy buenas tardes,
Hi,
Luis.
good afternoon,
Mi
Luis.
nombre es Juan Fernando Rocha Mier. Estoy aquí en la Sierra
Juan
Gorda
Rocha.
de
I'm here in
Querétaro.
Sierra Gorda in the state of
Y
Querétaro,
nosotros
Mexico.
principalmente llevamos 10 años dedicándonos
And we, for 10 years now, we have devoted
buscar
ourselves
gente
to look for people
desaparecida allá en la frontera.
who have
Pero
gone
también
missing on the border.
tenemos
But
una
we also
caravana de
have
migrantes
a migrant caravan.
por todas las extorsiones que sufren ellos, los
We look into the
migrantes que vienen de Estados
extortions
Unidos en
they
diciembre a
suffer.
visitar a sus familias a México.
Migrants that come from the
Primero,
United
pues por las
States to Mexico
autoridades
in December to
aduanales,
visit their
segundo por los
families.
grupos delictivos en la
They are
frontera y por
extorted
todas las
by
policías
authorities, the
estatales,
delinquent groups,
municipales.
and all state and municipal police.
¿Cómo podemos parar esta ola de
How can
violencia
we stop this
en
wave
nuestro
of
país
violence
hacia los
in our
migrantes?
country? This wave of
¿Cómo
violence against
podemos ser
migrants.
solidarios y alzar la
How
voz
can we be
ante tantas
solidary and raise our
desapariciones
voices
y ante
against so
tanto
many missing
derramamiento de
individuals
sangre
and
y
so much
dolor
bloodshed and
en
pain
nuestro país, en México?
in
tanto
our
para
country,
el paso de migrantes
Mexico, so much,
centroamericanos como para
both for
migrantes que
the transit
desafortunadamente
of
vienen de
Central
Estados Unidos a
American
pasar las
migrants and
fiestas
migrants that come from the United
con sus
States to spend
familias
the
y son
holidays with their
desaparecidos.
families
Muchas
and
gracias.
suddenly go missing. Thank you very much. Well, that's a difficult question, Juan. I think that this is a task that needs to be carried out personally as a group through laws, through protests. The idea is to make visible all these acts of violence. I would like to have a crystal ball and give you this specific solution that'll work, but unfortunately, I do not. Thank you, Reese. Okay, one last question. I have a written question and share it later and see what we can do about it later. Now, we have documented the perception of people, migrants who go through Mexico and Mexico. Oh, the experience of Mexican migrants. What would be the title of that potential documentary? Again, please. Have you documented the perception and feelings of migrants, of Central American migrants about Mexico or Mexicans? And if so, what would be the title of that potential documentary? I think it's already been made, but it would be called La Patrona. To conclude, I'm going to share the story of Maria Guadalupe. For me, Maria Guadalupe embodies the bonds between Mexico and Guatemala that we need to keep in mind. Maria Guadalupe, in 1985, was born in a refugee camp caused by the civil war in Guatemala. And therefore, she was born in this refugee camp in Chiapas. Her parents have fled the war, and she is born in Chiapas. After the war, once the peace agreements were signed, they returned to Guatemala, and she realized that she is the eldest of several daughters. I don't know, and the father has left. I don't know if he died or abandoned the family. But she started to work, and she set out to help her mother to support her sisters. This woman studied, she's very bright, she trains, and eventually realizes that if she wants to help, she needs to leave. So she migrates undocumented to the United States, and in the United States, in Mississippi, she meets a Guatemalan national. They become a family, and they have 3 boys, 3 US citizen boys. On August 7th, 2019, a raid in Mississippi, several raids in fact, had arrested many people. In one of these raids, she was apprehended despite the fact that she has a 4-month-old baby. They don't let her go. And the day before Christmas in 2019, she is deported to her native country, which is Mexico. At that point in time, her children have been considered US citizens, but Maria can't go to Guatemala to wait for her children, and what she has to go back to Mexico because she has a Guatemalan birth certificate. About 3 weeks ago, against all odds, she is able to return from Cancun, where she had been working since December, to her native town in Guatemala. And now we're trying to help her so she can get her Guatemalan nationality documents and in that way claim her children. But I believe that this family shows the solidarity that should exist and has existed for years between Guatemala and Mexico, and sometimes is smeared by selfish personal acts. Thank you very much, Luis. Ani de Castañeda was one of our speakers from the University of Guadalajara. So with this last participation, we will close. Nicte Castañeda. Hello, Reese. For me, it has been an honor to hear you. I'm also from Guatemala. I left Guatemala when I was 13, and I have experienced all of this. I am part of forced migration that occurred during the 80s. My parents were politicians. So after watching your documentaries, I re-experienced many things. And I just wanted to commend you and tell you that the struggle needs to continue, because the monster is not only the United States, but also Mexico is committing a large number of atrocities against Central American migrants. And every day we need to fight to improve the situation. And every day we all need to invest our own efforts so that migrants do not continue to suffer, especially in these days of pandemic where they're suffering even more. So I just wanted to express my appreciation. Nicte, thank you very much. My pediatrician had the same, shared your last name. Do you think it might be my relative? Because he's also a pediatrician. There are pediatricians in my family. Okay. I think he left us some time ago, but one of his offspring was a student leader, Oliverio Castañeda. Yes, he is part of my family. Well, Gustavo Castañeda used to be my pediatrician. So I owe my life to him after my mother. Yes, he was a family member of mine. What an honor. To all of you, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Reese, for the very beautiful presentation. Thank you for granting us more time than we had requested. Here in the comments, you can see, and in the questions, you can see this spirit of solidarity and appreciation that you have awoken among all of us. I hope that this isn't the last time that you join us. If you allow us, we're going to share everything we couldn't go over today and see if how we can overcome this. All these participations are thanks to the goodwill and solidarity of people who work in one way or another in pursuit of a better future and a better world for our children and the people around us. And this is thanks to presentations as Luis, and also thanks to the work of the interpreters who help us in a solidarity way. These professional experts who are donating their time for this cause, we thank you very much. And the interpreters booth thanks you as well. And we extended our session, so almost everybody that we started with are still with us. So thank you all. And Reese, I don't know if you have any closing words. No, we need to continue resisting. We need to continue in the good fight. Every day is an opportunity. These are difficult times. I think nobody ever imagined that we would go through days such as the ones that we've seen. And despite the fact that we're all in shutdown, we have this opportunity to meet in a virtual world. And to each and every one of you, thank you very much, and congratulations to the organizers of this course. Thank you very much, Reese, and we'll see you soon. A big hug to you all. Greetings and good evening. We'll see you next Friday.